Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Paratalk. And on this episode, I'm once again joined by Tom, and we're going to talk about doppelgangers. So, without further ado, hello Tom.
Hello.
How are you, mate?
I'm good. It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I think it's got to be a month, maybe a month and a half.
Yeah, maybe even longer than that. I don't know. It feels like longer to me. I miss being away so much. It feels like longer.
You're getting a Paratalk withdrawal. That's what you're getting. Yeah, it's catching. I think we've got a good one for today. I think the listeners out there are going to enjoy this because we're going to be talking about doppelgangers, aren't we?
Yeah. Before
we rush ahead to start talking about doppelgangers, on the level of demons, ghosts, goblins, where does doppelgangers come for you?
I don't know what. Like, do you mean like what the phenomena actually is? Or?
Where does it sort of register for you? Is it something you sort of often read about, or is it something that's like, that's?
I don't know where it lies on the weird scale because I've heard quite a lot of different doppelganger type stories, and they all seem to be. Some of them sound a bit sort of demonic or a bit folklore-y. Some of them sound like ghostly type of things or a bit of a weird dimensional jump time weirdness sort of thing. Others sound a bit alien. So I don't know. I'm interested in them though because I don't know. I remember when I was a kid reading about them and hearing that they were like a portent of death. And if you saw your own doppelganger, it meant you weren't long for this world. So I was always terrified of meeting my own doppelganger.
I thought I saw a doppelganger once, a long time ago. I don't know where I was. I was somewhere. I don't know if I was on holiday or, I was someplace. And I saw one of my school buddies. I swear it was him. It was the same sort of dress code, same sort of profile, the way that he looked, the way that he walked.
Did you speak to him or anything? Or like, did you try to like wave to him, or even if you didn't shout out to him?
No. I was with other people. I can't remember if I was with my parents or I was at a school or whatever. But I was not at home, and we were out, and it was, and I saw this guy, and he went to my school, but he wasn't in my my class or anything. And I remember seeing this. Well, what I believe to be this guy. Because it's same sort of dress code and everything, and same sort of people have a certain certain body mechanics. Everybody walks a certain way and stuff, and because we hung around a lot together, I kind of visually I would recognise him, and I saw him and I thought that's so and so, but I couldn't really shout out because I was with other people and that, and I didn't want to anyway because I didn't want to draw attention to myself.
But did you get a sense of whether he'd seen you?
No, because he was walking away from me. He was walking. He was on the other side of the road, and he was walking away from me. And as I came round the corner with these people, I can't remember I can't remember who I was with, but I was with other people. And as I came round the corner, I saw what I perceived to be my mate, thinking, "What's he doing here?" And he walked off round the road and crossed the road, and he was gone, sort of thing. But those few moments of seeing him, what I believe to be him. It looks just like him, and when we talk about doppelgangers, obviously for those out there that think, what's he on about? A doppelganger is seeing somebody who is an identical version of that person, and in some way either is perceived to be them or is just a reflection of them. It's motionless. Sometimes it doesn't do anything. Sometimes it does. But I thought, it's so and so, but I will never know. I did ask him, were you out? So and he's like, no, I was at school, mate.
I think there are some people who look like they have a lot of doubles around, because I remember like just like nothing paranormal, just like they have people who look a lot like him. Like there's a lot of people. Like I remember my friend who I went to university with, and he lives down in Wigan and I live up Newcastle way, so miles away. And I used to see his exact double on the way to work regularly. Like I used to pass him, and the first time I saw him, I was convinced that this was my friend coming towards me. He walked past me, did not like register anything, didn't look at me or anything like that. So I thought, that must not be him. And I saw him multiple times on the way to work. It wasn't some kind of ghostly thing. It wasn't anything weird. It was just a guy who looked exactly like my friend. And then I was speaking to another friend, and my other friend said to me, I see the double of this, the guy that I'd seen a double, I see him everywhere. Like he must have doubles all over the place because he's just got one of those faces where you just see doubles everywhere.
I think there are people out there that do look very similar. Moving on a little bit, one that I just want to touch on, that's one of the most famous, well-known cases of Doppelganger is
Emilie Sagee.
And for those that aren't in the know, Emilie's case, she was a French teacher in the 19th century, and it's one of the most famous instances of a doppelganger encounter. So Emilie, she worked as a teacher at an all-girls school, a boarding school in France during the mid-1800s. Despite being well liked by her students, strange occurrences began to take place that left those around her deeply unsettled. Multiple witnesses, including the students and fellow teachers, reported seeing Sagee's doppelganger appear beside her during various activities. The doppelganger would mimic movements precisely, as if mirroring her actions in real time. However, Sagee herself remained completely unaware of these apparitions, suggesting that they were not merely illusions or trick of the light. So I'm going to stop there, and I just want to discuss that a minute. I think there was one instance where she was writing on the chalkboard, for the children to copy or whatever, and she wasn't aware at the time of anything stood next to her, but the children then told that as she was doing it, they could see an exact copy of her stood next to her, mimicking her every move. Mm-hmm. How weird's that?
This sounds more like some kind of weird, I don't know, like a parallel universe version of her, or what it reminds me of. I've been watching Red Dwarf again, going back through all the episodes of Red Dwarf, and there's one called Future Echoes. Where there's something weird going on with the timeline, and they keep seeing like things happening just before they happen. Like someone will walk into a room just before the real one walks into the room, sort of thing. So they get a sort of premonition of things happening, and they're seeing doppelgangers walking around, and it really reminds me of something like that. Like there's something weird going on with the timelines, or some kind of dimensional glitch, or just something weird going on in that way, rather than it being like a ghost or a demon or something like that.
Does get a bit weirder. So here it says the doppelganger sightings became so frequent and consistent that they could no longer be dismissed as mere hallucinations. Witnesses described Sagee and her doppelganger occupying the same space simultaneously, with both figures appearing distinct and tangible. Some even attempted to interact with the doppelganger, only to find that it had no substance and would vanish upon closer inspection. Despite numerous attempts to rationalise or debunk the phenomenon, the sightings continued unabated. Sagee herself expressed bewilderment and distress at the report of her spectral double, unable to explain or understand the strange occurrences. Eventually, the doppelganger sightings became so disruptive that Sagee was forced to leave her teaching position. It was so disruptive and so, I suppose, unsettling that she had to leave her teaching post.
They're seeing her future self standing in this place where she would be at a later date, and maybe maybe she goes to, like when she stood in front of the blackboard writing. She does this so often that there's like another version of her standing almost in the same place, but just slightly off center, so they can see that there's actually two people stood there. It could be like a future version of herself, or something weird like that, a different timeline version of herself, or something along those lines.
I'm going to squeeze one more in, because I know you've got some stuff that you want to bring up from more modern days, but I want to squeeze one more in because I want to talk about another famous person who apparently had some weirdness going on with him, and that's Abraham Lincoln. Now, I'm just going to, it's not very long. It's in the days leading up to his assassination in April 1865, Lincoln reported an experience of unsettling premonitions and omens. Among these was a chilling encounter with his own doppelganger, which occurred just prior to his tragic demise. According to various sources, including Lincoln himself, the president was resting in his bedroom at the White House when he glanced into the mirror and saw his own reflection. However, what he saw was not just his own image, but a second ghostly figure standing beside him, an exact replica of himself, albeit with a pallid complexion and solemn expression. So he's got up, he's looking in the mirror, he sees himself. So let us continue. Shocked by the sight, Lincoln recoiled in horror, but the doppelganger remained steadfast, silent, observing him with an eerie intensity. We got this connection again, you see, this weariness. Some accounts even claim that Lincoln attempted to speak to the apparition, only to find that it offered no response, further deepening the sense of dread. The encounter left Lincoln deeply unsettled, and he confided in his wife about the strange vision. Mary was also already troubled by her husband's premonition of his death, and was understandably alarmed by the revelation, and urged Lincoln to take precautions to ensure his own safety. Tragically, just a few days later, Abraham Lincoln's worst fears were realised when he was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth while attending a performance at Ford's Theatre in Washington, D.C. His death sent shockwaves across the nation. The thing is that he observed this figure in the mirror, stood next to him, and emotionless, and yet he had the same... I mean, it could be, innate fear within us. So we see something like that that's so off the wall that we get that kind of, it just scares us.
When I was a kid, what I originally read about doppelgangers, that they were a premonition of some coming tragedy.
Yeah. Could it be based around the person themselves? For example, when you say doppelganger, right? If you said to me, I'm going to give you a word, a paranormal word, and give me something that you think's connected to it. If you say to me doppelganger, I immediately turn around and say a connected word to that will be poltergeist. If you look at the poltergeist phenomenon, we don't have all the answers, of course, but we started to learn a little bit now through research and investigations. And is that, like you just said earlier, are we showing a past event or a future event that hasn't happened?
Like I've heard multiple stories of people like where they wake up in the middle of the night and they see someone stood at the end of the bed, and it's double of, a family member. And then they get a call saying that family member's been hit by a car or something's happened to them and they've gone into hospital. They've either died or, they're in critical condition or something like that.
Yeah.
And they get like an apparition, and it's a premonition of something terrible that's about to happen. It reminds me of that.
It's quite a common occurrence as well. There are people that, have had that, like we just talked about. It's more common than I think what we are led to believe.
Another aspect of that is I've heard of where people who are on the verge of death will start to see loved ones around them. Either people who have passed by or people who they haven't seen for years. They'll suddenly see them sort of standing around like the doppelgangers, or maybe just the spirits of these people stood around their bed. I mean, we're probably getting a bit far away from the doppelganger subject here. I read once that someone who worked in, I think it was a nursing home or like a hospice, and so obviously they saw a lot of people passing away, and they noticed that there was a regular occurrence of the patient who was about to pass away would say that they'd seen a cat come into their room and jump up onto their bed.
Yeah.
And there was no cat in this building. And apparently it would happen like enough that it was spooky, and in the end they knew that this patient was about to pass away because they'd say, oh, I saw this cat come in, sat on my bed. There was no cat. It was just, I don't know, would that count? A doppelganger of a cat?
There's been many studies and many books written on stuff like that, where people have been in the room and there's been extra people in the room that they didn't know who that person was at the time of someone passing. And then when they look for that person afterwards, they're trying to find out who they were. They can't find any trace of that person, or no one remembers the person that was there. Everybody thinks they're with someone else. So, yeah, there's many of those cases. There's many from these doppelgangers.
Tell you what, I'll throw this one in because we've been speaking about kind of ghosts and weird timeline stuff. This one might be a bit of a curveball. It maybe gives a bit different slant on things, because I found this I was looking through my 40 times, the It Happened to Me books where people write in with their real life experiences. Now I read this one and I was like, I'm going to include this because it's interesting. Someone called John McLeod, writing in 2003. In the summer of 1980, I started seeing a strange little guy at the bus stop in Calgary on weekend mornings. His skin, eyes and hair all looked artificial. He had a grey suit and a briefcase and always stared at the paper. He never made a sound. He never looked up. His eyes never scanned a page or blinked, and he never turned the page. He got on the bus with me and stayed on till after my stop. I kept thinking that he looked like something disguised as a human being. This went on exactly the same every day for a few days. Then one day he wasn't there, but he got on at the next stop round the corner. The next day he was back at my stop again. He got on with me. And then at the next stop round the corner, another guy got on who looked exactly, and I mean exactly like him. They both stared at the papers. Neither one acknowledged the other's presence in any way. No one else on the bus appeared to notice that there were two absolutely identical guys on board with them. It was as if I was the only one who could see, or the only one who wasn't in on it. That was my last day living in that neighborhood, so I never saw either of them again. So I wanted to include that because this sounds more like some kind of alien thing to me.
It's weird.
Like the fact that he saw two... It's such an unusual story, but like, I don't know. The fact that he saw a guy first off who looked a bit weird and artificial looking.
Yeah.
And he thought that guy looks weird. But then to see two exactly the same. A doppelganger.
Do you think that you think of like doppelgangers and people that act a bit weird? Do you think there's a connection there?
I have no idea. I haven't looked too much into the Men in Black thing, so I wouldn't really be able to give a good opinion on them. But I've heard some accounts that they just look like normal people, and people have assumed that they were just like government agents of some sort. And then I have heard that they can look a bit uncanny valley.
Yeah,
like they're not really human, and they're trying to look human, but there's something slightly off about them.
There are cases out there where people say, "Oh, it's just a couple of blokes came in suits," but there are other cases out there where say, "Oh, these two people they looked like they had makeup on, they had very pale skin, they were very sort of they just looked a bit off. The way they acted was very robotic, very strange."
I just thought I'd throw that one in just because it's like it's a bit different to what we've been talking about as ghostly and weird. This sounds more like, I don't know whether it's aliens or weird. It sounds a bit more X-Files, really.
Yeah.
A bit more alien or clones or something. And it also reminded me of ages ago on podcasts, we talked about a case. You introduced me to it where it was some kid went missing in America and then he ended up in a cave.
In a cave, yeah.
He saw his grandmother in there.
Yes.
But it wasn't his grandmother. And he thought she was like, I don't know, like a robot.
Like a robot, yeah.
Yeah. It made me think of that. So just to give another slant on the whole doppelganger thing.
I'm clutching at straws here. But when you talk about doppelgangers and people's doubles, could it be some sort of, I don't know. I'm only speculating. I'm just philosophizing on what it might be. But if you think about how can I choose these words? I'm trying to choose my words very carefully so that I don't totally, not interpret things properly. But if you think of let's just use the word spirits, all right? The whatever they might be, I don't know. I just don't want to pigeonhole anything. But if you think of things out there that aren't not human, but they want to be human, so they take human form, right? But to take human form, they can't generate something that's unique. They have to copy something. So a person's doppelganger is a copy. For example, they want a person, so they copy you, but they have to copy what you do. They have to be a reflection of you. Something like that. I think to myself, if a person is able to generate a 3D lifelike representation of themselves that copies them in every way, that's pretty amazing. In itself, that's just amazing. If your mind is able to conjure that, then that tells me, and it shows me, that your mind is incredibly powerful, and that if you knew how to use that power, it could also be immensely destructive. And maybe, as we say, you read lots of things about, shady government departments, experimenting with paranormal stuff and mind over matter and stuff like that. Maybe that's, something they're trying to tap into. Who knows? Just to throw something in here, doppelgangers could be seen as manifestations of repressed aspects of the self or projections of the subconscious mind. They might be symbols of unresolved conflicts, fears, or desires. So what it's saying there is that say, for example, I've got, something on my mind that I've had for a long time and it's weighing me down, that in some way it's an outlet. My subconscious is outletting in some way. But, It's fascinating. Yeah. It really is. But you've got some. Did you have some stuff from Reddit? You wanted to?
I was scanning Reddit for interest. I was on r/paranormal, and I found a thread. And one of the things that attracted me to this thread was just because people are giving their experiences with seeing something that could have been a doppelganger.
Yeah.
But one of the things I noticed, I don't know if it's just this thread I found or whether it's on other stories. I think I've told my story of what I thought was seeing a doppelganger when I was a kid. I don't know whether I've probably told it on this podcast before, so sorry if people have heard this. But when I was a kid, I thought I saw my dad walk in through the back door of our house, walk down the corridor, and I was following behind him, shouting him. And he was completely it was like he was completely oblivious to me. He just kept walking down. He walked into this room at the bottom of the house, closed the door behind him. And I walked in after him, and the room was empty, and there was no way out of this room. So I don't know what I saw, but a doppelganger of my dad, basically, I think it was. And this thread's got a couple of examples. Was when people saw the doppelgangers, it had the same sort of reaction, where the doppelgangers sort of seemed to be completely oblivious to them and just kept walking. So there's one on this thread. The user's called Doll Know You Bob. It was the day my niece gave birth. I was sitting in my living room with my newborn, and I had been talking to my mum on and off about my niece. She ends up going to her room, and as I'm sitting there, I hear the bathroom door open. I look up to see my nephew walking straight from the bathroom into the kitchen. I smiled and waved, and he just looked back at me and kept walking. It was a few days before I found out that he was never even there. He had been at college the whole time. I like that story just because it's an example. A doppelganger sort of walking through an area where they usually would walk, but acting weird, as in just not responding to anyone around it. And I found another one going back to 14 times, where someone had gone to Thailand in the 90s and stayed there for a few years, and they'd made friends over there, and then they moved back to Britain. And then they got a call from someone who they were friends with over in Thailand saying, I saw you walking down the road, and I shouted to you, and you just walked past me. You completely blanked me. It was as if I wasn't there. He said, it was definitely you. It was exactly the same clothes, exactly the same mannerisms, the way you walked and everything. It's exactly the same face. You just kept walking. He just walked past me. He didn't respond. And this guy had been in England the whole time. He hadn't been back to Thailand.
That's weird. Maybe he was thinking about Thailand, or thinking about,
maybe,
and then that in some way he mentally projected himself there.
Yeah, but I just found I found these few stories interesting just because of my own experience with what I think might have been a doppelganger, and that whole thing of just the doppelganger seems completely oblivious. I remember I was shouting my dad. I was walking behind him, shouting him, and normally he would say something back, even if he didn't want to stop walking. But it was as if he just couldn't hear me at all. He was just walking down the corridor. And my dad's he's got arthritis. He's got a very distinctive walk. He kind of shuffles when he walks. And, no doubt it was him. And then he walked into the room and vanished. But it was like he was completely oblivious. And I was just interested because I found a few other people saying a similar thing.
A case here. Percy Fawcett was a British explorer who became famous for his expeditions into the uncharted depths of the Amazon rainforest in the early 20th century. In 1925, Fawcett embarked on what would be his final expedition, accompanied by his son Jack and Jack's friend. Their mission was to search for the mythical ancient civilization in the heart of the Amazon, which Fawcett dubbed Z or Z. The expedition was well equipped and well funded, but as they ventured deeper into the jungle, they encountered numerous challenges and hardships. As the weeks turned into months, Fawcett and his team pressed on, undeterred by the dangers that lurked around every corner. However, as they pushed further into the uncharted territory, they began to notice strange occurrences that seemed to defy explanation. Unnerving sounds echoed through the dense foliage, and shadowy figures darted through the underbrush, always just out of sight. Then, one fated day, Fawcett claimed to have seen someone that shook him to his core, a vision of himself standing amidst the lush greenery of the rainforest. The doppelganger, however, had a hauntingly vacant expression with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. Terrified but undeterred, Fawcett pressed on with his expedition, convinced that he was on the brink of a monumental discovery. However, as the days turned into weeks, there was no sign of Fawcett or his team. They had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only speculation about their fate.
Spooky. That's another portent of death, I suppose.
Yeah.
But how did they find out that he'd seen that vision if he vanished?
Well, obviously he wrote a letter, I suppose, but he saw something and then he disappeared. But, I mean, he could have come across a tribe. You're not having our gold, we're going to kill you. That could happen.
Or you could say he was pixie-led.
Or, yeah.
Sent off into the fairy realm. That's another thing that fairies are known to do, is sort of shape-shift and assume the form of either yourself or somebody that you know to lead you astray. You get a vibe in the woods, which I can't really... I'm sure there's a German word for this feeling, but I can't remember it at the moment. But there is a feeling that you get in the woods, and it's like... the hairs on the back of your neck sort of prickle up. Yeah. You kind of become aware of a certain energy or a certain atmosphere. And I'm sure there's a German word for it. It's like on the tip of my tongue, but it's something that other people have noticed. There's something weird about being in the depths of a wood or a forest or something like that. There's something weird in there, a weird energy. That is another source of doppelganger stories, is, you walk through the woods and you'll encounter someone that you think you know, and they'll lead you astray. Or you'll hear the voice of someone calling you and it'll sound just like someone, a loved one or one of your children or something like that. And you'll think, oh, they're in danger. You'll follow this voice and it'll lead you off into, I don't know, craggy crevice that you fall down or something like that.
When I was a little boy, I lived in the country. We had lots of farms and stuff around us, and there was lots of places to go and play and explore and stuff. And I would spend hours and hours out, in the fields and running around farmland and stuff. And one of these farms had a wood, but it was obviously a protected area because it was like where all the birds and the badgers lived and stuff. So the farmer he just cut around it, and it was quite big. It wasn't like, maybe the size of a football pitch. It wasn't like huge, but it was big enough for us to go and explore. And whenever we went in there, it was always a feeling of you were being watched. It was like you were someone else was in there with you. We never saw anyone. We never saw any. Well, we saw other people in there, like walking their dogs and stuff, but. We never were threatened by anyone, but we always had that feeling of looking over your shoulder, because we used to go in there and make stick dens and stuff like that and look for treasure and stuff. But as you do when you're a young kid, you do stuff like that. But yeah, we always found a bit on edge in there. I remember one time, right? It rained. It was a summertime, but when you get those like instant downpours in the summer where it's like thunder and lightning for like 20 minutes, and we were in this wooded area. We were just like making a den or whatever, and then it suddenly went really quiet, and it got really dark and like overcast, and it started like little bit of rain, a little pitter patter, and then it absolutely hammered it down, and it was thundering, it's lightning, and it was quite scary because we thought, what if the lightning comes to the trees and there's a fire and we can't get, with kids' minds, but it was quite unnerving being in there in a thunderstorm. We didn't care if we got wet. We got a little bit wet because it was summer. It was hot, But that was a bit off. That was a bit weird. But you're a kid. That's how your imagination works. But what are your thoughts and feelings on doppelgangers? Do you think that we will one day find out exactly what's going on there?
I don't think so. I honestly think I don't think it's one phenomena. I think all these stories have got such different feelings to them. Like that one I told about the guy in, I don't know, was it in Canada, where he thought he saw it was almost like a robot or something. Yeah. And then the people, the woman in, what was her name? The Emilie Sagee, that's, like I say, that sounded like some kind of dimensional weirdness, some kind of time slip. Other ones sound like a ghost or a demon. So I don't think there's one explanation for them. I think there's multiple types of phenomena that create some kind of double of a person. Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's us we're the catalyst. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, Tom, I just want to thank you for joining me on this episode for this little chat about all things strange. What will you be up to in the near future?
Oh, just the usual thing, making YouTube videos. I've got one in the works right now about monkey attacks.
Monkey attacks?
when monkeys attack people.
Actually, they're quite violent. Monkeys are quite violent.
Yeah, I was surprised.
I mean, I didn't know that monkeys were cannibals.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I think like chimps will eat monkeys or something like that. Yeah,
I didn't know that, and I read a case where well, I'm not going to say it because you might have covered it, and I'm not going to spoil it for people. But if there's a case that you've covered, it's quite wild. It's quite wild. But yeah, when chimps attack, sort of thing. But then again, you shouldn't have a monkey as a pet, should you? It's a bit silly.
Yeah, I think I know the one you mean.
Yeah.
I covered a case in a video recently about the lady who had
the lady,
chimpanzee
that's right.
as a pet, and it didn't end well for
her.
It didn't. It didn't end well for her friend, basically. But
no, it didn't end well.
This is more. Horrific. I'm doing a video now about like places in India where there's just monkeys roaming the streets.
Oh, like like with Gibraltar and stuff, where the monkeys are up on the rocks.
Yeah, like Gibraltar, but I'm sort of focusing on India because they're kind of protected over there because they're kind of sacred animals in Hinduism.
They just come and go as they please. They can just go.
Yeah, not really allowed to do anything. So it's got really bad in some places and with some dreadful consequences. So that's what I'm covering at the minute.
How's the gaming going? How's that going?
Yeah, it's going all right. I'm still streaming on Twitch and uploading onto YouTube. Shrouded Games. Doing some I don't know. I just pick like weird horror games and do a quick video on them.
You know, I'm completely off on a tangent here. I was quite a gamer about 30 years ago, and I had a spate where I just stopped playing games, and in the last sort of 10 years, I got back into it, but mainly playing the games that I never played when I was in the 90s. So I'm a very retro gamer. I play a lot of games that like Atari and then the early 90s PC stuff, which I love all that kind of stuff. But I don't play very many modern games. I mean, I'll play a little bit of Fallout and things like that. But so a game I recently started playing, never thought I'd play a game like this, is a game called Paradise. What's the name of it? Can't remember the name of it. Basically, you're you create your own arcade, and you have to do like you have to do sort of tasks within the game to create money, and then to create the arcade. It's one of these kind of like
I think that came up in my
Paradise Arcade or something. Yeah, it's quite cool because it's quite simple, but I never realised how much a simple game can take all of your time away. Because literally, it's a game of you working in a washing machine place, right? A laundrette. And the way that you make money is you wash clothes and clean clothes for the customers that bring it in. And the more in your shift, the more clothes you can get washed and dried and stuff, the more money you make. And the more money you make, the more money you can spend on buying new arcade machines, because the whole point is to make money from the arcade as well. And that brings more people in. But I was playing it the other night and I thought, I'll just give it an hour. 4 hours went by. I'm like, where did that time go? 4 hours disappeared, and there's not many games that do that, can suck me in like that, I tell you. I mean, there's a lot of games out there, and I start playing a game and I'm like, I'm bored. I mean, I started playing another game, a train sim. Oh, yeah. I never thought I'd play those sort of games. Maybe it's my age. But I started playing it and I was thinking, do you drive a train like this, do you? I turn that on, do I? Yeah. I'm just going to go for a little trip. 3 or 4 hours are gone. Yeah, that's definitely an age thing, because I've noticed that with myself. I've started playing like Euro Truck Simulator. I've already got that, mate. Yeah, you're just sitting there driving along the motorway really slow, you know. I've done that. It's like there's no action, but it's really relaxing. Yeah, it is. Yeah. put it on the big screen. Get your Xbox controller. Away you go. Deliver some cows or something.
Podcast on and just sort of.
It's brilliant. I never thought I'd be into those sort of games. I tried a flight simulator, but I just can't get my head around that. It's just too much to remember. Even in a basic plane, I'm like, oh, there's too much. I want to learn it, but I just don't feel I've got the time to learn it. It's like, I think you got to put in some serious hours to learn all the controls. But these games like the one I just said and the truck simulator game, brilliant. They're just brilliant. They're just driving around, backing stuff in and pick a trailer up and drive. Fill it up with fuel. It's great. I love it. It helps you relax. It helps you clear your mind. That's the games I like. I like simple games. That's why I still got an Atari 2600, because those games, even though they're simple, they are hard. And and they remind me of my childhood and playing games like that. But anyway, I'm turning into a Paratalk gaming now.
I think this is probably like the 10th time this when we've been talking, it's turned into a gaming chat. We always end up talking about retro games.
Yeah. You can't be retros. Can't be retro gaming. It's brilliant. There's so much stuff. There's so much stuff out there, retro stuff out there that I never thought that I'd actually get to play, because I thought I'd played it all. Because back in the day, I was a big Amiga. I was into the Amiga.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah, that was like the 16-bit. I wasn't into console. Well, actually, I did have a console. I had a Super Nintendo. My brother had just a standard 8-bit Nintendo. And the first ever gaming thing I had was a handheld, like all-in-one cartridge-based hand. It was the first handheld. What was it called? It was made by MB Games. It had like 5 different cartridges you slotted in. It was cost an absolute fortune, and the batteries lasted about an hour, and it was done a tiny little 2-inch screen, 2x2-inch screen. But it was brilliant. But my main gaming thing was either I had access to an Intellivision, which was amazing because it talked as well. If you had the talking cartridge, it talked. But mainly an Atari 2600. And that was, everybody back in those days, late 70s, everybody had one. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people had those. And because one of the great things having an Atari is if you've got a mate or his dad's got an Atari and he's got some games, you can swap them, But back in those days, you very rarely bought stuff. You always went to the TV shop and rented a game, like you'd rent you'd rent a video. You'd rent it for the weekend for 75 pence or whatever. So yeah, brilliant days. But so a lot of those games that I never got to play back then, I'm catching up with now and playing. But the more modern games, I don't know. I just can't get into them. I don't know why, but I should. Because they look so realistic and stuff. I've played a few games, and I've played Fallout and stuff. That kind of sucks you in. Those kind of games, I do like those because you don't have to rush them. You can play them at your own pace, But I don't like games that rush you to do stuff, and I suppose that's an age thing. But if you start putting you
should try the Forest games if you've not tried them. They're quite relaxed. They're horror game, but they're quite relaxing because you kind of, the premise is you've crash landed on a sort of tropical island, and it's inhabited by cannibal tribes, and you've got to survive and sort of build a little log cabin, and you can you can just spend hours just chopping down trees and building a little cabin and not really even engaging with any of the story. And it just turns into a nice, relaxing, like base builder game.
Yeah.
I've been spending a lot of time on those Forest games recently. And yeah, they kind of scratch that itch of like relaxing, sort of slightly dull games, but kind of relaxing and entertaining at the same time.
Well, yeah, 10 or 15 years ago, I would have seen a game like that. I got, how boring. How can anyone play that? But now I want games like that. Now I want to play games like that. I think that, I want to play games like that. I don't want all the mental stuff going on. That's why I can never get my head around anyone. I used to play games like Defender and stuff. But now the only games that I play like that are like Gallagher and Galaxian. And that's only because they were my two go-to kind of shooter games, Yeah. But a lot of the modern games, I just can't get my head around them. Just too much going on. Maybe because I'm becoming a bit of an old git. But anyway, that's enough from Paratalk Weekly Gaming for this segment. So I think what we'll do is, you'll be back at some point, depending on your schedule, because I know you're busy at the moment with stuff. I just want to thank everyone for listening. Remember, give it a share and a like wherever you're able to. If you've got any comments or suggestions, you can always contact myself on the Paratalk website, paratalkpodcast.com. There's a contact little tab on there. You can send in ideas. If you want to hear anything specific, then let us in, and maybe Tom and I will sort of put something together and have a chat about some stuff that you'd like to hear about. But until the next episode, thanks very much for listening, if you stayed this long. And it's goodbye from me, and it's, of course, goodbye from Tom. And we'll speak to you soon.
Goodbye.